Okay, is it visible to all of you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll start the lecture now. So today we will try to finish the topics on the application of particle presence in the flow. Okay, so we last week we already talked about the gravity settling, which is a separation of a particle from air typically, usually using gravity force. So that means we provide enough size of a chamber so that the particle can drop towards the bottom of the chamber. Now we will talk about the other two applications uh, that that relates with the presence of a particle. The first one is a filtration, okay, and then the second one is about fluidization. Okay, so I'll talk about the filtration first. I'll have some video later and some quick calculation or example for you to understand. First, I will try to introduce. This is the basic principle of filtration. I believe you've already heard or even applied some of this basic concept, but then we will see how it will be applied in a chemical engineering fields. Okay, so for a filtration, if we have a solid in a liquid is flowing through a filter media, the solid will be separated from the fluid, and the solid will be strained, forming two main parts of the outlet. Okay, so let's say if you look at this picture, we have a sludge. If we have a sludge, that means it consists of two main parts. It consists of a liquid and the solid or the particle. Okay, so it could be a sludge or a slurry. Okay, so sometimes it's called also a slurry. So you can imagine as cement slurry, for example. It must consist of liquid and a solid. Okay, so solid, uh, when you send it into a filter media, that means it has some kind of small size, okay, a pore size. So that's the keyword over here. What's the pore size of the filter? And it can be varied depending on the application, depending on the uh, size of a particle and so on. Okay, so maybe we are talking about some 1 millimeter particle size. That's already can be considered as quite big. Okay, but for some more advanced application, maybe we're talking about 1 micrometer particle size, pore size, or even nowadays it's becoming more uh, common to apply a nanoparticle separation. Okay, such the one that will be used in water treatment or even in drinking water production. Okay, so in terms of the feed itself, it's not always as dirty as this kind of sludge or a slurry. Okay, sometimes it could even what we can say as a raw water. Okay, as a raw water that contains some solid. Okay, so you can imagine it as well from water from well. Okay, or even water from river. I think that's also a good example. If you take a sample of water from river, it must contain some solid that has to be separated if you want to use it for cleaning, for drinking application, uh, for toilet and so on. Okay, so in terms of the solid itself in water, it can be as a suspended solid. Okay, suspended solid. So usually that's expressed as TS, as total suspended solid, but it can also be present in the form of a dissolved solid. So sometimes it is expressed as total dissolved solid. So when you imagine the water itself, the raw water itself, if you have like physically the solid looks like a dirt or a particle, let's say at the bottom of the containment, that's the TSS. Okay, that's the TSS, the suspended one. But don't forget that all of these are actually a mineral. Okay, whether that's a metal or any other kind of mineral that has some solubility inside of the water. So when we're talking about TSS that physically looks like a particle, don't forget that there are actually the TDS one are actually mixed all together in the main liquid form. Okay, because it's still dissolved. It's still with below the precipitation limit. If you remember the basic chemistry, KSP calculation. Okay, the solubility one. So that kind of thing. So when we have a filtration, now the question is, what's the size of the suspended solid? Okay, what's the size of the suspended solid? If it's a relatively big particle, then we put a smaller size of a filtration media, then we can, in theory, eliminates the presence of those bigger particle. Nowadays it becomes smaller and smaller, such as 1 nanometer particle. Why? Because maybe it has to even act as a disinfectant to remove bacteria or even a virus. Okay, so that's why the recent advance of filtration become smaller and smaller. In terms of the product, you can imagine where is the cake and where is the filtrate. Okay, cake is the solid above the filter media. Okay, so if you have this kind of sludge coming into the, let's say, a pond. Okay, let's say this is a pond that has some kind of filter at the bottom, and then you have another containment at the bottom. So this is actually what we call as a filtrate. So when the sludge, the water should be able to pass through the filtrate. Okay, the water should be able to pass through the filtration media, the filter. Okay, but the bigger particle shouldn't be able to go through this particle, this filter. Okay, it will be accumulated at the upstream part of the filtration. Okay, because of the size discrepancies. Okay, so that's the filtrate, and the cake itself should be that one. Okay, the accumulated solid. This is the illustration if we use a very traditional or conventional filtration. But nowadays the configuration and the type becoming more advanced and advanced, as we will be discussed in the next slide. Okay. So based on the flow directions against the filter media, these are two main types of flow directions. Okay, so please have a look and carefully see what's the difference, what's the advantages, what's the disadvantages of each type. Okay, the first one is called a conventional filtration. It's called a dead end. So it's similar to what's illustrated in the previous slide. In that case, you have a liquid flows perpendicular to the filter. So that's the sludge or a slurry. Okay, coming from the top, for example, because it's a liquid, that means it will behaves naturally to flows downward because of the gravity. So usually we take into account, or we take advantage of those movement because it needs pressure to go through the filtration media. Okay, so again the cake will be accumulated over here, represented as the black dot. Okay, that's the cake, and that's the filtrate. Okay, the clean one, relatively clean compared to the fit water. Okay, so if you look at the profile, how is the profile of time versus the flux? Okay, that's the flux of the filtrate. It's actually not stable because you can see that in the beginning of the process, let's say I redraw the line. Okay, in the beginning of the process, that's what we have. Okay, and initially the filter is clean. Okay, because we haven't removed anything from the feed. Okay, but along the time, because of the operation, then the feed that contains some particle, okay, that sent towards the filtration media, now it starts to build up the cake over the filter. Okay, and remember the mass balance, or imagine the mass balance of this system. Okay, so the mass balance of this system is you have a water, liquid, okay, liquid plus solid, and that's the filter. What you have as an outlet is only the liquid. Okay, so now the question is, where is the solid? Solid is actually will be accumulated in the process. Okay, solid will be accumulated in the process. That's what causes the cake thickness to build up as a function of time. Initially it was clean, then we have more cake, and so on and so on, because there is no way for the solid to exit the filtration. Okay, it just starts to build up, to accumulate inside of the filtration. And at one condition, the flux could be very, very small. Okay, 0, or maybe small enough that it's not meaningful anymore. Okay, that's what we call as maybe it's already saturated. Okay, it's some of the common term, it's already saturated, or it needs some regeneration. Okay, it needs regeneration, or a backflush, but you have to imagine that in this kind of configuration, when you want to regenerate, when you want to clean the filter, when you want to backflush the system, you actually have to stop the production. You need to stop the flow of the feed. That means if you're talking about a chemical plant, a water treatment plant, or a seawater conversion into drinking water production, it has to stop. And that's not good when it has a very strategic purpose for community and so on. Okay, so the advantage of a conventional filtration is actually the manufacture process is relatively simple. It tends to be cheaper, but the problem is it has a transient process. It's not a completely a steady state process. That means we have to stop the operation every once in a while to regenerate the process. Okay, and check the difference with the second type about the tangential flow filtration. Okay, over here, the liquid flows in the same direction as the filter. Okay, that's the big difference. So it's not perpendicular. Okay, and it's actually able to reduce the formation of the cake. Okay, see the illustration over here. Now we have a feed over here, that's a liquid, and okay, maybe I'll try to make it consistent. Okay, so that's the filter. Then I have a liquid plus solid. And actually in this configuration, we have to outlet stream. Okay, we have to outlet stream. That's the retentat. Okay, and the second one is actually what is called as a permeate. Oops, sorry, permeate. Okay, and permeate here is relatively clean, so that's almost like a pure liquid, and that's like a liquid, and that's like a pure liquid, and that's like a pure liquid. Okay, 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 and that's like a pure liquid. Okay plus solid, and it's like a concentrated. Okay, concentrated. Why it's possible? So you can see over here the flow or the configuration of the process when we have a feed that contains some solid. Okay, initially it was still clean. Of course, initially the bed can be considered as clean. Okay, then let me change the color. So this is the initial condition, no cake thickness. That means we have a maximum flux in the process. Okay, now we start to enter the feed, so it will start to form a cake inside of the filter. Okay, but the difference here now is you can still get the clean water, the clean liquid. Why we get a clean liquid as a permeate? Because the water can goes through the filter media, but the cake will still be prevented to go across the filter media. Okay, but the main difference here is we provide exit point for the dirty water, for the dirty liquid, that is called as a retentate. Okay, so if we compare, let's say, using the same picture over here, that's the feed. Okay, with that kind of particle density, maybe the retentate becomes more concentrated. Okay, we have like a concentrated slurry, rejected water. Okay, because most of the solid actually will goes towards this retentate. Okay, and the permeate itself maybe only very minor amounts of particle will go towards the permeate side. Okay, any questions so far? Can you imagine these two different configuration and the advantages and disadvantages? Can you still hear my voice?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. What else? So I think I've prepared example. Okay, this one. That says this is a reverse osmosis plant. Okay, reverse osmosis plant in Singapore. In Singapore. Okay, so if you imagine drinking water becomes a bigger problem nowadays, because even if you live in Jakarta, for example, it's very hard for PDAM to produce clean water from reservoir. Okay, so now the question is, even Indonesia is not the worst place for you to get a drinking water. Can you imagine how hard it is to get a drinking water in Singapore or even a Middle East or in Africa, for example? It must be we have to drill a very deep well until it reach the aquifer layer. Okay, so nowadays it becomes more common for some developed nation to produce drinking water from seawater. Okay, because it's abundant. Okay, if it's a seawater, it's abundant. But you need to have a technology to remove these saline salts inside of the seawater. So this is kind of a drinking water production in Singapore, or probably what it looks like also in the Middle East. And that's the the physical presence of this membrane. When you look it inside, what happens is at the outer layer of this membrane, okay, at the outer layer of this membrane, they have this very small pore, okay, maybe in nanometer size. So all the salts, all the bacteria, all the mineral can be rejected as part of the retentate, and then the water can be drink directly after it exits the membrane. Okay, so it's a big application of membrane in chemical engineering, and I think our program, our chemical engineering program is ITB has. Well, it's not arguably. I think it's the best professor, you can say, in membrane technology in Indonesia at least. But he's also very respected globally, Professor Iga Dewanten, who is also the vice rector of our campus, and I think also holds a different other position like board of commissioning something about the BRIN, Badan Riset Nasional, and so on. So he's like the expert. If you just name one person who is the really expert of this kind of membrane application, then he's the one, okay, who holds a different patent on membrane production and has a production facility to produce his own membrane and so on. Okay. So now this is some of the principle or the formula in filtration. Okay. So if a liquid contains a solid suspension flow through a filter media with pressure setting, solid starts to accumulate on the surface of or the cake. Okay, and the dynamic will change because of this presence of cake. Okay, so it follows mainly the Darcy law, liquid through a porous bed. Okay, so that's the surface area, filtration area. Usually this is the output that has to be calculated. What's the size of the membrane? What's the size of the filtration that has to be provided in order for you to clean this amount of water? Okay, so dVdt, that's the differential of volume over differential of time. Okay, that's the filtrate of volume. So that means that's a cubic meter, that second or hour. So let's say you want to produce 100 cubic meter per second, very big capacity of membrane. That's your volume, that's your time. Then the question is how big the area has to be provided. And of course it will be dependent on the properties of the membrane and the properties of the feed water. Okay, so that's accounted at the right side of the equation. So if you imagine again the looks of the membrane, that's the feed. Okay, and then that will be the permeate, that will be the retentate. In order for this permeate to go through this very small pore size, we need to provide enough pressure or force, because it will lose some energy, it will lose some pressure to go to this very small pore. Okay, so in all of the filtration calculation, we must talk about the pressure drop. Okay, because actually that's the driving force. Okay, that's the driving force of the system. If there is no pressure drop in the system, then I will bet that the permeate flux to be zero. There is no way the feed can go through this very small pore size. Okay, so in general, first we express this kind of resistance. Okay, we talk about driving force, so of course it correlates with the resistance. Okay, of course it correlates with the overall resistance. But now the question is, the overall resistance must consist from at least two main components. Okay, which is explained in the subsequent formula. Okay, this one is the resistance only for the media or the membrane. Okay, that's only for the media or the material. Okay, So there are different type of materials for this kind of membrane. Okay, let's start with the organic one. So organic one, the one that come to my mind is cellulose acetate. Cellulose acetate. I think this is like the most standardized material for membrane, cellulose acetate. So it's a polymeric base. Okay, it's a polymeric base. Okay, and other polymer. Okay, other polymer. And also there are other types of membrane such as zeolite membrane. What else? I think some kind of metal metal complex. Okay, some kind of metal complex. So of course this difference in terms of the material of the membrane will have a different effects on the separation process and the driving force requirement. Okay, because different material will have different pore size. It will have different chemical affinity towards the water or even towards the hydrocarbon oily liquid. Okay, so that's why when you buy a membrane, see what's the pore size, what's the uh, permeability. Okay, because that tells you about the resistance of the media itself. Okay, and the second one also, it must be affected by the resistance of the cake itself. So of course it will be affected by the solid fraction or the solid amount inside of the feed. Okay, so see what's the properties of the feed or the slurry or the sludge. How lean or how concentrated the slurry is, that will affect the resistance of the system. Okay, so again, if you try to imagine the unit over here, that must be cubic meter, that must be a second. Okay, that must be a square meter. So in general, both sides of the equation now will be expressed in meter per second, linear velocity, okay, of the production. And if we want to further derive this correlation, see how can we estimate this cake accumulation, because even the cake thickness could change along the way. Okay, so how can we estimate this resistance? Okay, so that's what we're trying to do over here. That's the initial equation from Darcy equation as expressed in the previous slide. Now we try to expand, especially the cake formation. Why? Because it could change depending on the thickness of the cake. Okay, so we have alpha, which is a specific cake resistance. So maybe for dirt, for NaCl salt, for metal, okay, or for other carbonate salt, they could have different cake resistance. Okay, mineral, what else? Yep, other salts, okay, other minerals. All of this cake will have different alpha. Okay, that must be measured in experimental setup. For example, once we know, then we can apply it into this correlation. So that's the alpha. What else? And then rho of the cake, weight of the cake per filtrate volume. So that's a density. Okay, you have weight kilogram per cubic meter of the filtrate volume. Okay, and it's multiplied by V per A. Okay, volume of a filtrate per area of the membrane. Okay, that's volume of the filtrate per area of media. So if the volume change as a function of time, then the cake resistance change as a function of time. Then it's very likely that the production of the filtrate will also change as a function of time. Okay, but we can substitute this RC. Okay, that's the RC. We substitute into this RC. Then now we get the overall expression. The R can be reverted back into the initial equation to get into this correlation. And this is the main, I will say, the main correlation that we use for most of the examples or exercise in filtration. Okay, so you have 1 per A dV per dt. Again, that's already in meter per second, I think. Yep, meter per second. Surface area, that's dV per dt. So that's the production of the filtrate. Okay, that's the filtrate rate. Flow rate. Okay, then you can estimate what's the sufficient pressure drop in order to produce that kind of production. If you already know what's the viscosity, what's the specific cake resistance, and then the density, and then the production and the media resistance. Okay, any question up until now? Okay, I will continue then. Again, I will still start from this Darcy equation. So that's our Darcy equation. 1 per A dV dt equal to delta P per mu alpha. That's initially that's the overall R or resistance. For filtration, it can be mainly operated into different setting. Okay, you either want to keep the same filtration rate, you either want to keep the same production rate, the constant dV per dt, or you want to hold constant delta P. Okay, and to simplify those two different applications, now we can try to substitute those into a more measured and empirical parameters. Okay, so again, this is still the same equation. It must be a meter per second. That's U, that's 1 per A dV dt. And see this kappa, okay, which is a permeability of a solid filtrated. Okay, that's a permeability. And you can see the correlation between permeability with the other variables by looking into this, comparing these two equations. Okay, so you still have delta P over here, you still have delta P over here, and then you still have mu over here, but now you can express the rest of the variable as a function of permeability. Okay, let me check. Okay, so all of this resistance that correlates with length of the or height of the cake. Okay, so both of them are useful. Okay, depending on what kind of input that you have in the exercise or in the real application. Do you have the measurement of the resistance? Do you have the measurement of the density? Do you have measurement of the specific resistance of the materials? Or you directly measure the permeability of the solid as kappa? Okay, so it's not really a big, it's not a big difference. It's just matching with what's available in your exercise, in your case. Okay, if it's provided as kappa, then you can simply start to use that equation directly. Okay, then you just need to use the kappa and the length of the height of the cake. But if it's not provided, then maybe we have to start from the more fundamental equation. Okay, so maybe we start with the alpha, we start with the rho, we start with the V per A, we start with the Rm. Okay. Regardless, now if it's already mentioned or expressed as a function of permeability of the media, then it can be derived as a following equation. 1 per A dvdt, that's still the delta P, kappa area of the membrane, again, usually that's the one that is calculated, the area of the membrane, if we are designing a new equipment, per alpha mu V. Okay. And if what we need to know is the cubic meter per second, okay, cubic meter per second, or what is the production of our membrane facility, for example, cubic meter per hour, then it can be calculated as a delta P multiplied by the permeability multiplied by the area of the membrane per alpha mu 1 per V. Okay, I'll continue, I think, with this one slide first, and then we'll see a video to give you an illustration of how it works. Okay, coming from the previous slide, we know that if we know the permeability of the membrane, we can simplify the equation into this correlation. Okay, dV per dt equal to delta P kappa alpha square 1 per V alpha mu. So I'll put it this way over here to help you simplify the derivation. Okay, so I told you that filtration can be performed in two different way. Okay, I don't think I need to write it. Okay, first one is you either want to operate at constant pressure drop or you want to operate at constant volumetric flow velocity. Okay, and this depends on your equipment that you have and the purpose of your application, of course. Okay, so if you remember, if you imagine, okay, let's say I have a, okay, how am I going to, okay, let me put it this way. So you have a sea over here, okay, as a seawater source, okay. Then you have a pump to suck the seawater. Then you have your membrane system. Then you will have a retentate and permeate. Okay, if you look at this illustration, okay, that's the sea water. You have a pump over here, okay, and what kind of pump, and then how it will affect the process of the filtration. Usually, a pump will have a very definitive characteristic, what we know as a pump curve. Okay, so it already has a number in terms of what is the P suction, what is the P discharge, for example, and of course they have the performance curve, the pump curve that we already learned in the previous model. Okay, so let's say if we strictly look at this picture, it's a good example about how a constant pressure drop can be applied, because a pump will have a very fixed amount of feed flow rate. That's the capacity of the pump. That's the what can be received by the pump because of the dimension of the pump. Okay, so the flow rate can be fixed. Okay, that's the flow rate can be fixed because of the selection of the pump, and then the delta P of the pump itself already fixed because of our selection of the pump. Okay, and because of this configuration, maybe now it's possible for us to have a constant delta P as well in the membrane, constant delta P in the membrane. But you have to imagine what's the consequence of those decisions. Okay, so let's say seawater, of course, that's atmospheric pressure. Let's say that's 1 atm. Then you install a pump. I don't know. Let's say give it 10 bar. Okay. Then what is your constant delta P in your system? Let's say we put quite huge delta P to be able to provide enough driving force. Let's say the delta P is set constant to be 5 bar. So that means 10 minus 5 here, we always have a permeate at relatively constant pressure of 5 bar that will be able to go towards the pipeline. Okay, but see the consequence of this selection. Okay, again, this is coming from the same derivation. Okay, the consequence of this constant pressure drop is now the derivation becomes alpha mu per kappa of a square integral v dv is equal to delta p integral dt. Okay, and what you want to fix now is the delta p. All of these are variables, constant variables. Okay, that's constant variables. A is a selected area, selected or design area. Okay, so what you left is only the delta p, which is now already fixed in this kind of setting, v dv and integral dt. So you may have a function of volume as time. Okay, why? Because integral v dv now becomes 0.5 v square from 0 to v, right? So now the correlation become alpha mu per kappa a square v square is equal to delta p time. That's the derivation. Okay, so the consequence now, when you look at the volume of the filtrate, okay, the v itself, now it becomes this correlation. Okay, you have a square root because the v now is a v square, so v now must be inside of the square root. But what is also important to see here is v is a function of time. Okay, v is a function of time. That means volume may change because of the time. Because of time. Why? You can also remember the previous slide about the cake accumulation. Okay, over time, if the membrane is not clean, the solids start to get accumulated, and it start to block the system. Then we lose the production of the water, clean water. Okay, so it's possible to perform a constant delta P in the membrane or in the media, but the consequence is the volume of the filtrate now may change as a function of time. Okay, and this is the big difference compared to the second setting. Okay, if we really need to make sure that we have a constant volumetric flow rate, so we lose the constraint in terms of the pressure drop. Okay, so this applies if slurry is pumped through the filter using a positive displacement pump, different kind of pump, as I mentioned before. Okay, so now if we start from this correlation, start with the same correlation. Okay, dV per dt equal to P1 minus P2 kappa alpha square per alpha mu 1 per V. Okay, instead of fixing the delta P, now what we try to fix is the dV per dt. Okay, now it becomes fixed production. Okay, now it becomes a fixed production. And actually, if we have a constant dV per dt, it is the same thing with Q or debit. Okay, because that's a cubic meter per second. So now the formula becomes in a way simpler, but again, what's important is you have to understand what's the consequence of this operation. Okay, so now the consequence of this operation, now you have to provide gradually increasing delta P. Okay, because just rearrange this equation. Now you will get into this equation. Rearrange the equation, delta P to the left side, Q into the right side. Okay, now you will end up okay, it's possible for you to maintain the same production, the same Q, but your delta P now is a function of time. So if initially you only need 5 bar, for example, to go towards the membrane area, later on maybe it starts to build up to increase to 6 bar, to 7 bar, to 8 bar, to 9 bar. Then maybe when it reaches to 10 bar, your pump will not be able to provide it anymore, and you still have to stop the operation and clean the system. Okay, I'll stop the explanation first now. Any questions so far? No question? No question? Okay, see what's next. Here I have a couple examples of a filter. Okay, not only membrane, but we also have different type of filter in chemical engineering. I think this we have this kind of filtration in chemical engineering in LabTech 10. First one is called as a plate and frame filtration. Okay, so if you see over here, why it's called as a plate and frame, it must consist of plate and the frame itself. Okay, but I think you will better understand when you look at the video that I will play. Okay, in practice, you have a sludge coming into the system. That means you have a liquid plus solid. Okay, then of course this sludge will fill the area occupied within this plate and frame. Okay, so initially it will cover the area of each plate and frame. Okay, then once it's completely filled, it will be pressed. Okay, it will be pressed. That means there will be some hydraulic parts where it will press the system, the plate towards each other. Okay, and as you can imagine, like it's like extracting something. Okay, so maybe the clean water, the filtrate now will be collected. Okay, it will be collected towards the header, and then later now we get the filtrate. And afterwards, the cake will still be trapped. Okay, cake will be trapped in the filter. Okay, so we fill it first, one by one, until it's fully occupied. Then we press the filter, and then we get a clean water filtrate, and the cake will still be trapped in the filter. Okay, let me check if I have some video. Yeah, I think this is how a filter press works. Is it visible to you, the animation and the sound?
Yes, sir.
Okay, see, this is the plate and frame. Imagine from one side you have a sludge. That means a solid plus liquid. Then how it will be separate. And the blue and the red line over here tells you about the header, whether that's a feed header or the filtrate header, like a pipeline. Okay. See the movement of the plate. Okay, see the movement of the plate. Now the right part over here becoming very tight, whereas in the left part of the filter now it's still loose, but it will be tightened. now it gets tightened towards the left and right. So here is the illustration. You have this touch, the black light enters the chamber, enters the plate. All of the plate now is filled by sludge. Okay. Now, see, this is the sludge. So, of course, there are different types of filtration. The first one is use manpower. That means we push it manual, but nowadays more automatic. So let's say we press a button, then there will be some pressurized air, hydraulic pressure air to move this plate towards channel to tighten the plate. Compressed air. See, this is the compressed air, as I mentioned, as a hydraulic to tighten the plate within the filtration. And it's also possible the air is like a blower. That means it's used to flush the accumulated solid within the filter. Okay, so okay, let me rewind it first. Let me rewind this. Over here. So after all of this chamber are filled, when you press the system, of course you will be able to extract the water of the system. Okay, like you press a fresh orange, then the water will be pressed, and then it can exit the filtration. Okay, let's in one of these small pipeline over here, while the cake is still stuck inside of the plate. Okay, that's when you loosen up the plate and clamp, and all of these are still trapped inside the plate. You can either use the show storage here. See the black line over here. Some of the solid falls down, okay, to the bottom. Some of them are we help water so the water already exits the system, all of them. Now we open the filtration to remove the that's the end of the video. Any questions about the principle of filter press? No question? So let me go back. That's the plate and frame filtration. Second type is rotary. Okay, that means it involves some centrifugal force. So I think I'll have another quick video for you. Basically, you will notice some of the main characteristic over here. Hold on, where is my pen? Okay, so that's your product. Okay, then you will have a fit. Okay, let's say fit's coming from somewhere around this place. Okay, or slurry. And this slurry will, so the filter over here is actually the one that I will redraw. Okay, the outer layer, that's the filter. By putting the filter over there, now the liquid can goes through the center of the filter. Okay, the liquid will be able to go through the center of the filter. Then it will be collected as the filtrate. That's the collected filtrate. And you can imagine, because of the size, of course, the cake now will be trapped. That's the cake that will be trapped. Okay, cake that will be trapped because it cannot go through the filtration at the outer layer of the filtration. Then at the other end of the filtration, there will be some kind of knife so that the solid product can be removed. Okay, so that now you have your cake over here and you have your filtrate from the middle of your filtration. Okay. I'll play the video. Rotary vacuum drum filter.
Common needs into dewatered dry waste. Typically, this waste mounted It is offered both with semi-automatic design works. The operation of this Alar Autovac filter is semi-automatic. The operator charges the pre-coat tank with filtering media called diatomaceous earth, or DE. The DE slurry overflows into the filter pan, and the
So that's the knife where the cake is being removed from the filtration.
Vacuum draws the DE filter media onto the cloth.
To prevent any accumulation of the cake.
This pre-coat operation takes about 15 through the DE media is capable of into the pan. The level controllers located within the pan maintain a constant liquid level, eliminating the need for operator attention. The vacuum draws the liquid through the.
So if you imagine at the below layer of this cake, all of them are filled actually with a filtration media. Okay, where water can go pass through those outside layer of this media, while the solid will still be trapped at the outer part of the filtration. Okay, and then the filtrate will be accumulated from the middle of the filtration,
eliminating the need for operator attention. The vacuum mercury stellite knife and extremely high with every revolution, which prevents blinding or clogging and provides rapid filtration and extremely high filtrate clarity.
Coming to the inside part of the filter.
After a long day of continuous use, the deep and easy cleanup. Cleanup is with next batch.
Some cleanup, then all of the cake can be removed. See, all of this rotating part, this gray area, this is actually the filtrate. This is actually the filter that has some very small pore size. Okay, so if we have some slurry, the water can go through inwards part of this filtration, while the cake will fill the outside part of the filtration.
With an automatic option, the AutoVac is designed for remarkable disposal costs and recommended regulation disposal
for this course. Okay, any questions? Any question? Okay, you still can hear my voice clearly?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so hopefully those two videos helps you to imagine how the filtration works. Now I'll give one exercise. Just follow the example over here for you to hopefully understand more. Okay, if you have any question, just let me know. Okay, so this is one example of variance if we have a filtration exercise. Maybe some of the final exam will look like this, or some of other minor adjustment. Okay, so here let's say we have a laboratory filtration of calcium carbonate, slurry in water, and the reported available pressure drop is 338 kilonewton per square meter. Okay, the filter area, so that's like the delta P. Okay, I will start to put, that's the delta P. Then the filter area of the plate and frame fresh was, that's the surface area. So of course that's the A. The slurry concentration, CS, is 23.47 kilogram per cubic meter. So it's like the opposite of the density. Okay. No, I think that's the density of the solid. And if you see that the experimental data measured provided as can be seen in this table, calculate the constant alpha and calculate the constant Rm of the particle. Okay, so this is like a measurement when you have a fix. So if you look at this equation, you have a fixed area. Okay, that's the area. You have a fixed pressure drop. Let's say because the limitation of the pump requirement. Okay, then you have a function of this dV per dt. It may change, it may not change, but it's measured. Okay, that's measured. Okay. Now, what we don't know with this kind of data is we don't know what is the Rm and what is the alpha. That's the calculated variables. Mu can be taken from the properties of the system itself. Okay, and then what else? Density that can be taken from the viscosity and density of this calcium carbonate slurry. Okay, so in this exercise, the size is fixed, the production are measured. What we don't know is the Rm and the alpha. Okay, and it can be treated the other way around. Let's say now we later can find the number of this alpha and this Rm of this material. Then when we try to scale up the process, when we try to replicate the process, this alpha and Rm can be used. Instead, maybe what we are calculating is what is the required surface area. Let's say if you want to double or triple or increase 10 times the production. Okay, so I will start again from this main equation. That's the Darcy one. So always start with the Darcy one for the filtration. Then see how can you rearrange the equation. Okay, because what you have here is the dV per dt, or can be expressed as dt per dV as well. So it's just a matter of what will you regress statistically. Okay, what will you regress statistically? Here, what you want to find is the alpha and the Rm. So it's actually much better if you express as dt per dV, not in dV per dt. Why? Because later you can regress as a statistical linear regression. Okay, and you can see that it's like a linear equation. Mx plus c, right? That's the gradient is the Kp, b is the constant, v is the variables. Okay, so later if we know the gradient, the m, the Kp, the m itself is this part. Okay, that's the k based on a linear regression, while the intercept b, that is the of this overall variable. Okay, so the first step for you is to plot this dt per dV plot. Okay, then next step is to calculate the Kp, then calculate b, then you can rearrange the number to get what is your actual Rm and what is your alpha. Alpha is part of the K, Rm is part of the B. Okay, so I'll just copy paste all this data T per V, okay, into Excel. So that's the T and V as provided in the question. Okay, first measure time, second measure time, third measure time up until the last time of the experiment. Then at each collection time, it is measured the amount or the volume of the filtrate. Okay, at each sampling time. So that's, in this case, I think we have 10 sampling time. Okay. Now you just have to rearrange the equation as explained before. If you want to have integral dt per dv, that means you need to arrange as a t per v for each collection sample. Okay, t per v per each sample up until the last one. T1 per V1, T2 per V2, T3 per V3, up until T10 per V10. Why? Because again, remember, that's your regression. Okay, so if your typical linear regression is y is equal to mx plus c, that's your y, that's your m, that's your x variable, that's your constant. Okay, then it's a matter of linear regression. Linear regression, again, see what's the axis, what's the x-axis and what's the y-axis. Here the x-axis is the Kp, which is mu alpha cs per a square delta p. That's the Kp. Sorry, that's not, that's the gradient. That should be the gradient. That's not the axis. Okay, my mistake. That's the gradient. X-axis is only the v part. X-axis is only the v part. So that's the v. Y-axis is dt per dv. dt per dv. So you just need to plot it. Your x-axis is B3 to B12 volume. Your y-axis is C3 to C12 T per V. Consistent with my explanation. Then, by looking visually, it looks like a first order correlation, okay, as can be derived over here. So you just need to right click in Excel, okay, add trend line, for example. Add trend line. Then you show the equation if you want, you show the R square. That's your correlation. Then this is the one that is expressed in this correlation. The gradient 3 million something over here, and if you want to expand the number, then I think you just need to format the trend line. Then where can you, okay, hold on. Yeah, I forget the format trend line label. Number, yep, format trend line number, and then change to number. Then you can play around with the decimal. So now instead of rounding number, you get the final, the correct number. Then you get the gradient, 2.884 million. That's the gradient. Gradient is Kp, mu alpha cs per a square delta p. Okay. Then what's useful from this gradient is you can find the alpha. Okay, because mu is available, cs is available, a square is available, and delta p is available, and Kp is provided from the regression. Okay, so now you can calculate the alpha. Alpha is Kp multiplied by A square multiplied by delta P divided by mu NCS, as written in the formula. Now you know your Kp, your alpha, specific kick resistance, and your Rm, the media, is of course coming from the intercept. Intercept is 6,000 something over here, and the intercept is mu per A delta P Rm. So your Rm is the intercept multiplied by A multiplied by delta P divided by mu. Okay, any question about filtration? Because afterwards I will not talk about filtration anymore, so we'll go into the last part of the session, the fluidization. Is it understood? Which part is confusing and has to be re-explained? Okay, any question? So again, the main equation that you have to start for the filtration is the Darcy one over here. 1 per A dV per dt, delta P mu 0, alpha PC, V per A plus Rm. If it's a regression calculation to find Rm or to find alpha, then this is the example. Okay, but that means you need to have the data for the dV dt profile. You need to have the data for surface area. You need to have the data for the delta P. Okay. The other possible variants of the question probably in this slide, the slide 13. What if the filtration is used in constant pressure drop? Okay, what is the volume filter rate, for example? What is the time required? That's also possible. What is the time required for the filtration to finish up until X amount of volume filter rate? Okay, or the other variance I would say is probably the constant volumetric flow velocity. What if now you can play around with the changing delta P over time? What's the debit of the system, or what's the volumetric flow rate of the system? That's also possible, other variants of the system. Any questions? Yeah, because now we will talk about fluidization. Okay, I don't have a lot of time anymore. I think probably I'm too ambitious to try to finish it by today. Let's see how far we can go. Okay, and let me talk to Pak Wawan if we need some adjustment. So now it comes to the last application of particles, which is a fluidization. For example, the illustration can be found in this illustration. Okay, catalyst bed. So it's like a reactor. Okay, this is sometimes called as a fixed bed reactor. Fixed bed reactor. Why does it call fixed bed? What is bed? Bed is, so here is the catalyst bed. So you have a solid, you have a particle intentionally placed within the reactor. Okay, this is the catalyst, metal, zeolite, and so on, intentionally put inside of this reactor to expedite the reaction kinetics. Okay, when it's called as a fixed bed, that means the velocity of the solid should be 0. That means it doesn't move. Okay, that means it doesn't move. The consequence of that, you have to make sure the volume of your reactant to be below the fluidization velocity. You can imagine, let's say we start from a very small velocity, let's say 0.00001 meter per second. So it's like a very, very slow velocity. It will not move the solid inside of the system if it's a very small velocity, because the force balance is not able to lift the particle. So there are some reactors intentionally designed this way. Maybe it can be increased to 0.001, 0.001, 0.1, up until it starts to reach the fluidization velocity. Okay, now the question is, what happens when we keep increasing this velocity? Okay, what happens if we keep increasing this velocity? Okay, so when the volume becomes higher than the fluidization velocity, the particle will start to be lifted. Okay, the particle will start to be lifted. So it will fly around because of this fast velocity. And this is where the fluidization regimes can be found. Both of them are useful. Some reactors are designed in a fixed bed configuration. Some other reactors are designed in a fluidized regime. Let's say to get into the required temperature profile, to get into the required conversion profile, and so on. Okay, so now we have to understand where is the limit. So that's the first and most important question. Where is the limit of this fluidization? If I maintain the velocity below those limits, I will get my fixed bed regime. But if I keep increasing and it reach above the fluidization velocity, then I will reach my fluidization regime. Okay, so if you only need to focus on one very important variable, is how can I calculate this fluidization velocity, which will be different depending on the size of the particle. Of course, the bigger particle will require a bigger velocity to be start to fluidize. Okay. And in terms of the regime, this is the complete regime. So this is the fixed bed. Particle is not lifted. Okay, it's not lifted. So must be at the smallest superficial velocity. Remember the concept of superficial velocity. Assume at void fraction equal to 0. Okay, I think I explained it in the gas flow presentation. Okay, the bigger the superficial velocity, then the particle starts to be lifted. Okay, so this is when U is below UMF. MF is minimum fluidization. This is when U is exactly the same with UMF, minimum fluidization regime. You can see that it starts to have a space, but it has not completely lifted. Okay, then you keep increasing. Now it bigger than the minimum fluidization. It's already stayed as a smooth fluidization regime. Then you keep increasing. Now you get a bubble, okay, like a big disperse of void within the reactor. You keep increasing the velocity. Instead of bubble, now what you have is a slug, a bigger slug. Okay, you keep increasing up until the last one. That's the fastest velocity that you can give to the system. Now it becomes a fluidization, a complete pneumatic transport. Why? Because all of the particle now will goes towards the product, including the solid. All of them are gone, right? So this is the explanation of the different regimes. So again, if you have to focus first on one variable, then it's very clear over here. You have to know the limit of the UMF. What is the UMF of each particle when the particle starts to be afflicted? Okay. So okay, let me check first. Let me go back first. Then we already talked about the trend in terms of the velocity. Now see the trends in terms of the epsilon. Okay, epsilon here is a void fraction. Or porosity, which represents the same thing. Okay. So it's like the volume overall. Okay. So if you look at this fixed bed configuration, usually the epsilon will be in the order of 0.35 to 0.4. Okay, that means 35 to 40% of volume filled by particle. And if you see the white space in between the particle, that's the void area. That's the void area. That's the space where it can be used for the gas or liquid to pass through. Okay. And of course, when you keep increasing the velocity, epsilon will start to increase. Okay. Epsilon will start to increase. That means it become more voided. You have more space inside of the vessel. Okay, up until the most extreme one. That's the biggest epsilon. Maybe that will be close to 1. Okay, it becomes like an empty vessel because all of the solid already lifted, exiting the vessel. Now almost of the space belong to the gas and liquid. That means the epsilon close to 1. Okay, that's the definition of epsilon or void fraction. So, but now hopefully you're not distracted with the fact that there are 7 regimes in fluidization. But actually, for you, the minimum fluidization velocity for all of these 7 regimes are still the same formula. Okay, so you still have one UMF formula for all regimes. Okay, and luckily the pressure drop correlation also can be calculated only as a 2 different scenario. Okay, so we just need to focus on the what is the fixed bed pressure, fixed bed delta P calculation, and what is the minimum fluidization condition. Okay, so this is regime 1, and this is regime 2. looking at the picture. But actually, for what's happened? For regime 3 to 7, same formula can be used. Same approach. Even the same results will be, you will get the same results in terms of the delta P in regime 3 to regime 7 will be the same with regime that is found in delta P that is found in regime 2. Okay, so it looks like a lot of variation, but actually not. As long as you know what is the minimum fluidization velocity formula, that's one big tick in the exercise, then the pressure drop, you know the delta P in the minimum fluidization condition. So if I put it delta P1, delta P2, up until delta P7, okay. Delta P2 will be the same with delta P3, it will be the same with delta P4, it will be the same with delta P5, it will be the same with delta P6, up until it will be the same with delta P7. All of them can be calculated in one correlation, in one formula, in one step calculation. So in a fixed bed, this is the illustration. The velocity meter per second, of course, can be calculated from the cubic meter per second of the volumetric flow rate divided by the surface area available in the space. Okay, so if it is cylindrical, of course, the surface area can be calculated as a phi per 4 d square. And almost all of the minimum velocity calculation as well as the pressure drop calculation are calculated as a function of superficial velocity, not actual velocity. Same thing with what is used in the two-phase correlation, the gas-liquid correlation. It's more important to calculate as a function of a superficial velocity. What is superficial velocity? Again, superficial fluid velocity is calculated when the column is not filled by particle. So completely voided, okay? Epsilon equal to 1. So I'll start with the Reynolds particle first. Hopefully you still remember this part from last week course. Reynolds particle is a function of a particle diameter multiplied by the rho. That's the slip velocity. Okay, remember, that's the slip velocity. And the mu. Okay, the same Reynolds particle. And a pressure drop inside the fixed bed is quite analog to a pressure drop in a straight pipe. Okay, remember when you a couple weeks ago learned about the delta P in the straight pipe correlation using a fanning, that's a fanning or even a Moody correlation. It's still the same. It's the same concept, but now we accommodate the presence of the particle. Okay, we accommodate the presence of the particle. So it's just a matter of the derivation. Okay, it's now can be converted into the delta P correlation when the particle presence in the string. Okay, so this is the delta P of the system. Okay, of course here you don't have any epsilon. Okay, for a pure liquid correlation. Of course, you don't have any epsilon and you don't have any dp. Okay, why? Because you can always assume for a clean liquid the epsilon to be 0. Okay, for a clean liquid without any particle. But now, because of the particle presence, we have to put the epsilon to use the actual area available for the system that can be used as an area for the flow. Okay, that is not filled by the particle. So the function of this epsilon is to if it's initially voided, okay, then all of this space can be used for a stream. Now you have a lot of particles, so some of the area cannot be used for the stream. So of course it has to move around to find a space. Okay, so that's the I think that's the 1 minus epsilon. Okay, that's the 1 minus epsilon. So the area becomes less and less when you have more catalyst or more particle inside the system. That's converted by the presence of the epsilon. Okay, and of course you have a dp over here because the size of the particle will affect on the pressure drop of the system. Okay, the rest it is similar to how the correlation is used for a pressure drop in a straight pipeline correlation. So you still need to find the F, the friction factor. The friction factor is expressed as a dp cubic per rho u square 1 minus epsilon delta p per L. Okay, so that's the final derivation that readily used for the calculation. Now you can use the F, this over here. So this is like an analog for, okay, see this one? That's the analog of the 3FF. That will be the same with FP. Okay, so that's why, and in order to calculate the FP in presence of particle, you have to accommodate the epsilon, you have to accommodate the particle diameter, you have to accommodate the slip velocity. So all of this calculated together, now you get the FP, which is like 3 times of the FF. So now it's almost like again like a straight pipeline calculation. Once you get the FP, okay, once you get the FP. Let me separate this dp epsilon. Okay, let me remove it first. Okay, dp epsilon. Okay, actually that's also consists rho USF 1 minus A. Okay. Okay, compare this one. dp delta p epsilon cubic, dp epsilon cubic dp per L 1 minus epsilon rho USF 1 minus epsilon rho USF. So all that part together are the FP. So now if you rearrange the formula, the delta P now becomes epsilon per 1 minus epsilon 2 per third FP. Then you move that part of the correlation to right side. Okay, rho u square L per D, which is very similar with this form. That's the F part. That's the F part. That's the L per D part. That's L per D part. That's the rho u square. That's the rho u square. Okay, so again, that's what I mean by it's very analog to a pressure drop in a straight pipe correlation. The main difference is this correlation. Fp must be a function of a particle diameter and the void fraction. Once you sort out that Fp, now it's just a same correlation with a pressure drop in a pipeline. Any question? Okay, so that's the formula that you can use to calculate the delta P. Okay, I will not complicate the calculation, so hopefully that can be understood. This is just the long explanation to derive into those first calculation, where if you question previously where is this part coming from, the epsilon per 1 minus epsilon 2 per third available in this part. Okay, that can be explained in this slide 23 and 24, which is coming from the wetted area effective diameter. Okay, remember the effective diameter, which is the 4 times the fluid volume per wetted area. And by solving this correlation, now you will end up with that the effective diameter is epsilon per 1 minus epsilon 2 per third of the particle diameter. So, okay, hold on. Okay, let me close the full screen first. I think. Okay, let me copy paste here. Okay, so I told you before that the Fp can be calculated using this formula, but also it can be approximated based on the Reynolds particle. The same thing with, so it's like analog to Fanning and Moody chart. Moody chart, where you can calculate F as a function of Re. Okay, so similarly, Fp can be calculated as a function of Reynolds particle. Okay, depending on the regimes. Okay, using a chart. During the laminar regime, Fp will be equal to 150 over Reynolds particle. Plus, okay, it's missing something. Plus, no, that's correct. That's a laminar. And this is for turbulent, where Fp will be 150 per Re plus 1.75. Okay, so in a very turbulent turbulent regimes, okay, so let's say that's already more than 1000, then you will already working in a very, your Re bigger and bigger, that becomes a smaller factor into overall final numbers of the Fp. So now let's say you get your Fp close to 1.75 as explained in this very turbulent regime. Okay, in a very turbulent regime, you get 1.75. Now, once you get into this Fp from the chart, you can actually divert it back into this delta P correlation. Okay, so now let's say your 1.75 is dP epsilon 3 per rho u square 1 minus epsilon delta P per L. Now it's already known as an input, so this delta P can be calculated as an output, because the rest should be known. Okay, dp should be known, epsilon should be known, velocity should be known, length should be known. So using this correlation, now you can finish the delta P calculation pretty quickly. Okay. For a non-spherical particle, don't forget to correct the sphericity factor. Numbers will be 0 to 1. Okay, I think I won't be able to finish the course today. Otherwise, it's very forced and it's not good for you. So I think I will stop the explanation, the course now for today. And I already talked to Pak Wawan, so change of plan because we only have 2 more weeks, okay, this week and next week to finish the semester. The last exam should be held during the final exam period. Okay, so it's not gonna be next week. So this week and next week will still be a course, and because of this time limit and I couldn't finish the session by now, I think next Friday will still be by me, okay, by myself to finish this fluidization part. Hopefully we can finish it in 1 hour so that Pak Wawan will still have next week 3 hours to finish the rest of the slide. Okay, so for now I will finish the fluidization part up until slide 25. This should help you to finish the delta P correlation. Okay, delta P correlation in a fixed bed. Okay, and in order for you to practice, to assist you to practice, I'll give you a homework, okay, to finish this exercise on slide 26. Okay, so please submit to MS Team before Thursday, okay, before 25th of November, okay, and then you've done your part in this exercise, then I can so the solution initially only provided the formula that you need to use to finish this calculation. So again, as I explained before, that's your dp, that's your USF, that's your density, that's your mu, that's your epsilon, that's your L. So check those number. dp is available, USF is available, rho is available, mu is available. So NRE particles can be calculated pretty quickly. Okay, after you finish the particle, Reynolds particle, then you can calculate the FP, the friction factor. Then rearrange the delta P. This one should be the same with this FP. So if the question is the pressure drop, then rearrange the formula. Delta P becomes F epsilon per 1 minus epsilon L per D rho USF square, all in SI units. Okay, then you should be able to get into the pressure drop of this fixed bed reactor. Okay, any question before we conclude this today's lecture? Okay, so if not, then yeah, just do this exercise first and then submit it on MS Teams on Thursday. Then we will finish the we'll continue the topics on Thursday. Okay. Okay, I'll conclude the session. See you on Thursday.
Thank you, sir.
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 Thank you, sir.